Kellan and Ruby approach Castle Ardenvale atop their new ponies, gifts for their most recent heroic deeds. After learning the truth about his Lord Talion's part in casting the Wicked Slumber, Kellan didn't feel much like a hero. He looks over to Ruby, who's cloaked in her namesake color, its length concealing a blade of eternal ice. With the last of the crown's power, Hilda granted Ruby's wish to have a sword as big as she was. An eerie quiet rolls across the plain, for no foe had hindered their path to the castle. The front doors were torn from their hinges. The corrupted heart of the curse had rotted and consumed the wood. The dreamers that lurk beyond the doors were the nightmares that plagued Kellan on their journey. This was not a place of comfort and rest, nor a place for glory. It is a place where wounds fester. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Ether Hub. I'm Simon, bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. Today we continue the Wilds of Eldraine story with Chapter 5, our finale. In our previous chapter, which you can find linked on your screen now or in the playlist found in the video's description, we continued the journey of our budding hero Kellan as he seeks to end the Wicked Slumber by defeating the 3 witches responsible for it. However, he learns a dark truth, that his kindly Lord Talion also crafted this hideous spell, and that he was only using Kellan to clean up his own mess. Feeling used and less like a hero, Kellan pushes onwards to Castle Ardenvale to face the final witch, Arit, only for the greater good of Eldraine, no longer concerned with learning more about his true fae father from this trickster lord. At Castle Ardenvale, Rowan Kenrith has teamed up with Ashiok and the witch to bring peace to Eldraine through strength. The Wicked Slumber and the Sleepers will be their weapon. What will be the ultimate fate of Eldraine? Now we continue with Wilds of Eldraine Chapter 5, Broken Oaths, written by Arsenault Rivera. Remember, if you're enjoying the content here, to please support us by leaving this video a like, sharing it with friends, dropping a super thanks, and becoming a subscriber. It all goes a long way in helping the channel grow. And now, let's get back to the lore. Kellan didn't want to enter, but something in his blood made him stick to his oath. Ruby protested that they would just be hurting the sleeping guards if they fought their way through them, so they tie their horses to a post, leaving them with bags of feed, and stand at the base of the castle wall. Kellan produces the remaining frogification potion that their beanstalk guide Troyan had given them, but this time it's Ruby's turn to be a frog. Kellan climbs onto her back, and they both jump up and over the castle walls. Kellan looks around as Ruby begins to change back into her human form. There are no sleepers standing guard here. They aren't sure where to find the witch Arit, so they open the first door they see. They peer into a yawning hallway, lined with faded and defaced portraits. The only light comes from the violet mists hanging just above the stone floor. Together, the two heroes follow the winding cords of mists through the halls of Castle Ardenvale. They pass rooms that are empty and ransacked. The only sounds are the echoing squeaks of mice. It's no wonder they hear footsteps scraping against the stone before they ever see who's coming. Kellan and Ruby press themselves on either side of the door, and Ruby peeks around the corner. She looks stunned and gestures for Kellan to do the same. Standing before a lectern, surrounded by swirls of violet clouds, is Rowan Kenrith. Kellan couldn't believe their luck. She must have figured out how to end this curse as well. He dashes into the room with Ruby close behind, calling out to Rowan. Instead of a warm welcome, Rowan demands to know who they are and why they're here. Kellan explains that they came to defeat the witch, just like she did, they supposed. He wondered why she was frowning. Maybe the curse was keeping her in this place. Rowan Kenrith neither laughs nor smiles. She lays her hands on either edge of the lectern as sparks crackle along her fingers. Her voice was cool and level as she told them to leave. The late High King's daughter probably could handle this herself, but Kellan promised that he would help end the curse. Rowan tells them that it's best if they're not here. Something in her voice is disconcerting, and Kellan takes a closer look at the book before her. In jagged handwriting, he could read, Attempt 23. Haven't been able to put anyone to sleep yet except for the old-fashioned way. He has no time to process what he's read, for Rowan is wreathed in crackling sparks. Suddenly, Kellan's vision goes white. As Kellan wakes, he hears the faint noise of Ruby's voice, sounding alarmed. A shower of cold water pours over him and his eyes clear to see her holding an empty bucket. He moves to wipe the water from his face and realizes he had been bound with rope, but that rope had already been cut. Kellan sees Ruby holding her frosty sword and wonders how she got it back. Sir Rowan had knocked them both out and was trying some weird dream magic on them, but she was interrupted with the arrival of a cavalry. Ruby woke to find them guarded by 2 sleepers, who now lay motionless on the floor. Kellan can't believe Rowan turned on them, but Ruby heard her say that she was trying to help them. A very peculiar stance to take, given she just shocked them with lightning. In her heart of hearts, Rowan knew this dream couldn't last, just as no amount of training prepared her to save her family from New Phyrexia. No amount of wishful thinking could extend this respite into lasting peace. Her time studying the magic that would save Eldraine had always been fated to end, but she hoped she'd have longer than just a few weeks. Her brother Will, who styled himself as High King of Eldraine, sent knights who were now bursting through her front gates. Arit was seated upon her throne, violet strands flying from her wrists to the sleeping warrior's limbs. While Rowan struggled to weave a dream for just the 2 children she captured, Arit was able to control an entire army. Ashiok had left the realm to attend to business elsewhere. Rowan was all Arit had to help her. A woman in her brother's vanguard orders them to stand down as Arit positions 2 ranks of sleepers at the foot of her throne. The vanguard's arm is wooden, wielding a hammer and fire magic. Rowan recognizes this as Imodain. Of course, someone as careless as Imodain is shooting fire at innocent sleepers. Rowan focuses on the sparks in her blood, letting them build, until she unleashes a bolt aimed for the knight's feet. Stone shatters as Rowan declares there's no High King of Eldraine anymore. Imodain looks shocked to see her, as Rowan steps up onto the dais to protect this witch, Arit. As she rises, Rowan spots her brother, and comes to realize that all this will end today, one way or another. Behind the vanguard, he sits atop his white horse, sword drawn. Rime coats his armor, and despite riding into battle, he hasn't the sense to don a helmet. Seeing her brother was like seeing all of the parts of herself that she didn't like, externalized into someone else. He calls out to Rowan, his voice full of ache and disbelief. There's a lump in her throat when her brother looks at her like this, with fear, like he wants her to be something other than what she is. She calls back, saying that she's learning how to save the realm. He thinks this isn't like her. Working with witches to curse the realm? When will he realize that the Rowan he knew is dead? Will begs her to come home. Is this what he thinks the High King should be? A man on the verge of tears atop a warhorse? At best, it was contradictory, but it certainly wasn't strength. Rowan wants so badly for her brother to understand that she's never going to be all right again, but she knows he never will. Then, her sword is beating back shields and snaps of lances, parrying and dodging. When she reaches her brother, she levels her sword and dares him to dismount. His cool eyes study her. Then, he steps from his warhorse, drawing no weapon. Will tells her that their siblings, Hazel and Eric, need them. They still have a home. Their parents were dead, the realm shattered, and her brother was acting like talking about it would help. He never was one for action. Rowan moves to slash him across the chest, a move he must deflect. But Rowan is stronger. She's always been stronger. Under a relentless barrage of blows, Will steps backward. His knights part to let the twins battle. If it was because they feared her or because her brother ordered them not to touch her, Rowan didn't know. Will shoots a bolt of ice at her feet, finally stopping her in place. The battle rages around them. Knights against dreamers, friends against friends. Her brother fights back tears, admitting he's sorry he didn't help her when she needed it. Rowan cannot look at her brother this way for long, so she checks for Arit over her shoulder. Her heart sinks as she sees the children have gotten free and are attacking the witch. The boy, Kellan, slashes with golden whips, and the girl is swinging a sword twice her size. Arit may be powerful at spellcraft, but she was no fighter, unable to deal with the children and control the sleepers at the same time. Will can't believe she wants to save this witch, that she's happy to fight against him to do so. Rowan explains that this is their aunt, that magic had always been in their blood. They could use it to keep Eldraine safe. No one has to suffer anymore. No one has to die. Will tells Rowan that he doesn't know her anymore. His words unleash another wave of anger. Rowan blasts the vanguard again, over and over. She lets loose her frustration and hurt at her faithless former friends. She would show them all her power. All of them knew she was hurting, but left her to rot. Rowan lets out a breath as the dust of her rage settles, expecting to see everyone lay low. Instead, she sees a cocoon of ice, pitted, cracked, and scarred. Will dismisses it with a wave of his hand, still trying to convince her that her solution won't work. Rowan charges her brother, relying on her sword where her magic failed her. As she slashes, a familiar hardwood catches her blade, and Imodain shoves her back. Rowan feels iced against the nape of her neck, and smoke begins to fill up her lungs. Veils of black coalesce into Ashiok's elegant form, now standing amidst the battle. Rowan smirks, knowing that it's second nature for Ashiok to control the Dreamers. Now they attack with a new grace, swaying away from incoming blows, dealing their own with vicious precision. Imodain sends a devastating blow that Rowan doesn't bother to dodge. There's something she understands that the others don't know. They can't win against Ashiok. Rowan just had to hold out long enough for Arit to put them all to sleep. Rowan drives the pommel of her sword into Imodain's face and sends sparks through her armor. Imodain howls, trying to tear the heated plate from her body, while a dozen more knights surround Rowan. 13-1. She likes those odds. 4 of Will's guards collapse around him, all from blows dealt by Rowan, as they now join the ranks of the sleepers. In the distance, Rowan spots a flash of gold among Ashiok's smoke. It's the boy from earlier, swinging some enchanted chain, weaving between the combating knights. She turns back to Will. The boy was merely one child against Ashiok. What could he possibly do? Rowan criticizes her brother's diplomacy. If he'd talked to the Phyrexians, does he think their parent would be any more alive? For years they've sparred. For years they knew each other's tricks. Will can conjure ice shields to deflect her every move. As he ices the ground at Rowan's feet, she tells him if he would look around, he would see his army has fallen asleep. Will, like the follower he is, does as he's told. Rowan watches as he looks around him, as he conjures a final icy bolt that she easily avoids. He smiles. It's the oldest trick in the book, but as typical, she's fallen for it. Rowan looks behind her to see Ashiok, now with an ice bolt through their chest. Rowan realizes that the boy wasn't trying to defeat Ashiok, but merely hold him in place for Will to land a strike. Ashiok lets out a howl of pain as ice spreads through their body. Smoke swallows them, and in an instant, they're gone. Rowan realizes Ashiok still had their spark. They were still a planeswalker. She was too stunned to react to the girl in the red cloak, now pressing her sword to Arit's throat. Arit looks calm and collected as her eyes meet Rowan's over the ruins of the throne room. A single thread of the curse, hardly noticeable, links them. The witch tells Rowan to leave. When the time is right, they would meet again. Arit assures her that they wouldn't kill her. They were too soft. So, they would bide their time. The thread of the curse snaps, and Rowan is once again alone in the recesses of her mind. If she didn't heed Arit's advice, surely her brother would imprison her. There would be an endless parade of tender-hearted fools coming to heal her, to speak with her, to try and understand her. Meanwhile, Eldraine will still be splintered. If she pretended to be alright, Will would still be High King, and Rowan would always be the woman he graciously forgave. The rebel. No, there was no going back now. Rowan Kenrith takes a breath, letting power crackle through her. It's difficult to control when there's this much of it, but as the energy leaves her, she aims it down at the ground. There's a boom, louder than the fall of a giant, and Rowan is in the air. From up here, she can see the threads of the curse coming together centered around the castle. When Rowan stayed with Royce the Weaver, she had warned that rest would come when it was least expected. Eldraine needed to rest, after so many dreams were shattered in the Phyrexian invasion. As does Rowan. One day, she would bring the blessed slumber to the rest of the realm. But for now, Rowan drifts to sleep. After the battle, High King Kenrith takes Kellan and Ruby aside. He tells them he's never met children braver than they are, and that they're invited to come to the palace whenever they like. He seems distracted to Kellan, but if it was his sister who'd just done all that, Kellan would be a little distant too. As Ruby makes plans for her to visit the castle with her brother, Kellan slips away. Ruby deserved all the rewards she could get, facing down a witch with a sword of ice, saying well in a story. But now it was time for Kellan to face a truth he didn't think was promised. In a sleepy farm outside the even sleepier village of Oranshire, there's no talk of heroes. Kellan has never been so grateful for the distant sound of sheep's bleating as he walks down the path to his family's farm. When he walks by the Cotter boys, they glare at him just as they always did, but leave him be. He still fears them, even though he knows he shouldn't, for at least he knows he's strong enough now. Hex is the first of the family to greet him. The dog bounds across the rows of turnips, streaming drool behind him. Kellan lets out a sigh of relief as Hex licks his face. No matter where he's been or what he's discovered about himself, at least Hex still knows who he is. It isn't long before Hex's barking announces Kellan's presence to both his mother and stepfather. Kellan's parents run to him, and he stands in an embrace. He's finally home. When he walks into the house, his mother presents him a coat she's made for him, with vibrant threads ranging from deepest azures to the brightest of yellows. Embroidered through are elks frolicking around the elms, and the forests that surround Oranshire. Primroses bloom along the cuffs. Below a pocket, a girl sits before a pond of water, staring at her reflection. The lining shows the same girl following a man whose skin is streaked with blue. How long had she been spinning this for? How could she have possibly finished this in the time he was away? It was beautiful, so much so that he couldn't possibly wear it outside or get it dirty. As he embraces his mother, she smooths his hair and explains that she enchanted it. Kellan and his mother sit down at the table, and she wants to explain about her past. She supposed Kellan asked the Fae Lord about his birth father, but in truth, he hadn't. All he did was to ask Talion to send him home, so he could hear about his father from her. Tears well in his mother's eyes, and when she's ready, she begins to tell the story. Kellan's mother met his father during her training as a witch. She was out gathering nightshade when she found a man lying among the dangerous blossoms. He invited her to sit with him, and offered as much nightshade as she wanted in exchange for a conversation. Knowing he was a fae, she made him promise it was only a conversation. He told her his name was Oko, and newly arrived on Eldraine. He wanted to know more of the plane, and from a pretty girl, it was all the better. Kellan knew the blue-streaked man embroidered on his cloak is his father, this Oko, laying among the nightshade blossoms. His mother sighs, thinking it was the first time anyone had ever called her pretty. The realms outside of Eldraine were thrilling to her, so they exchanged stories. They talked among the flowers for hours, eventually realizing they would need to meet again. She couldn't remember the name of the realm that he came from, but Oko said the Fae reigned supreme there. He found the idea that humans should challenge the Fae of Eldraine very amusing, and lamented that he couldn't confront Lord Talion directly. Of course, back then they were young, and all young men talked that way. Over the next few years, they would meet in the Nightshade Glen, and he would come in many forms, and showed her many things. Without his aid, she would never have escaped her mistress, a terrible witch who was very cruel. For a while, the two of them went wherever they liked, and did whatever they pleased. He taught her more magic than her mistress witch ever could, and even promised her a throne, to make her a queen. Then, the trouble started. Though she had been freed from her witchcraft, the townsfolk thought once a witch, always a witch. They didn't want anything to do with her, which in turn upset Oko. Staying on Eldraine was wearing on him, and eventually, he hurt people who had been unkind to her. She wanted badly to go away with him, but she couldn't. Thus was their personal curse. No matter how much they loved each other, they couldn't continue as they were. She wasn't meant to be a queen. After all that struggle, she just wanted peace. But he wanted to raze everything to the ground every time someone offended her. She admitted even after he left that Oko called on her again just 3 years ago while she was spinning in the night. The girl within her wanted to go to him, but the woman she became couldn't. Kellan listened, too intent to interrupt, looking over his coat. Kellan cannot sleep. Stories of his father swirling in his head. He wonders how many times he may have seen him already. His mother said he liked to take many shapes. Maybe they've already met. But if so, why hadn't he introduced himself? Kellan wasn't brave enough to ask his mother, though the question kept him from rest. He decides to take a walk, and pulls on his new coat, stepping out into the darkness of the wilds. They used to frighten him, but not anymore. The woods would never betray him, so long as his blood smells of pine. Hex follows him, and Kellan can think of nothing to say to his old friend. His head was full of questions, and one shouldn't ask questions of an old bloodhound. After a few minutes, Hex bolts off, catching a scent, and Kellan chases after him. Over the boughs, past a prickly copse of yew, he finally catches up to Hex. The hound assumes a pointing position and barks, aiming straight for a portal? A swirling series of interlocking triangles stands beneath the swaying branches. This looks nothing like the portals to Lord Talion's realm, and on the other side, it looks nothing like Eldraine. Kellan remembers that Troyan told him about other realms. His mother too. Was this his father's way of reaching out? What if this is a test? What if his father lives out there, somewhere on the other side? Kellan steps forward. He isn't leaving home, he'll just be right back. He pets old Hex and steps through the portal. Arete hears a cool and familiar voice commanding her to wake. She wonders why it's been so long since she's heard this voice. When she opens her eyes, there's smoke billowing through the jail cell, despite the utter lack of wind. Ashiok stares at her, the smoke emitting from their translucent shrouds. Chains rattle as Arete stands, but the guards are not alerted. No doubt they're dreaming of something far more pleasant than guarding her. Ashiok tells her that plans need to be made. Arete asks where Rowan is, but Ashiok says that she's not ready for what's to come. Opportunity calls them in a new direction, one far from here, one far from Eldraine. Ashiok promises that she will learn much, and will be allowed to return to educate Rowan if she wishes. But then she would have the servants to attend her queendom while she was away. That information certainly soothes the matter. Rowan will be fine on her own for at least a while. Ashiok's hands hover over Arete's shackles, explaining just how far from here they were going to take her. Arete answers, telling Ashiok that was a good thing. Ashiok didn't laugh, they never laughed. As the shackles fall to the stone floor, so too does darkness. In the morning, when the guards searched the cell, Arete was gone. And there you guys have it, Chapter 5 of Wilds of Eldraine, the finale to this wonderful story. Now personally, I enjoyed this story a lot. It still suffers from the same pitfalls that the MTG story in the modern day struggles with. Namely, there just isn't enough content in these 5 articles to really flesh out details to this story. We are left unclear about many aspects, while others are just totally dumped on us at the last minute. I'm not taking anything away from the writer in this case. I actually really like Rivera's writing in MTG, but if I could just make one suggestion to Wizards of the Coast, it's please open the gates a bit and allow for at least 10 articles per set. It would go a long way in making stories feel a bit more weighty. With that being said, we learned that Kellan's father is actually the planeswalker Oko, the Fae planeswalker who played the villain of the original Eldraine set. We learned that a lot of what he did was out of protecting Kellan's mother, which actually goes back and adds a lot of context to what I thought was just general mischief / villainy. But surely this will lead to a father-son meeting between the two eventually, as Kellan now walks through an Omanpath on a new adventure. The fighting between Will and Rowan, to me, really needed the bulk of the additional articles to flesh out. Will essentially disappeared for the majority of the story, and we really needed to get into the reasoning behind Rowan's decision to side with a witch. But of course, the good guys do win, and Rowan essentially becomes another Luca who just cannot live with owning up to her bad decision and goes full scorched earth. Only time will tell if she's able to recover from this emotionally, which I hope she can. For now, High King Will Kenrith will rule with a much more cooler head. And finally, as this starts the Omanpath arc, we get a little sneak peek at what nasty plots are being made in the background. Ashiok doesn't do much in this set's story because they're actually orchestrating something much bigger. They're now teaming up with Arete, insinuating that they'll be taking an Omanpath together. Maybe Ashiok can now control Omanpaths and gather allies from different worlds. Whatever it is that they're planning, and planning they are, it won't be good for the multiverse. But we'll see as new information comes out. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's video, everyone. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content here, then please consider supporting us by leaving this video a like, sharing it with friends, dropping a super thanks, and becoming a subscriber. It all goes a long way in helping the channel grow. And until next time, guys, see ya!